Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to dive deep into the fascinating topic of rewilding the Saiga antelope in North America. We'll start by exploring the history of the Saiga antelope, a species with a remarkable past that once roamed vast expanses across the planet, and how it could potentially make its way back to the North American continent. Next, we'll look at why rewilding the Saiga antelope is essential for North America, and how this incredible species can help restore ecological balance. But it's not just about bringing back one species, it's about bringing back an entire ecosystem. We'll also discuss where Saiga antelopes might be rewilded in North America, and why certain regions are perfectly suited for their reintroduction. Then, we'll get into the interactions these animals could have with other wildlife: deer, bison, wild horses, and even apex predators like wolves and bears. You'll see how a new dynamic could unfold, enriching the environment and creating a healthier landscape. Finally, we'll dive into the concept of Pleistocene rewilding, bringing North America back to its natural roots by restoring ancient ecosystems. And most importantly, we'll explore why we need this type of rewilding in North America today for the benefit of biodiversity, climate resilience, and much more. So stay tuned as we explore the exciting possibilities of Saiga antelope rewilding in North America and the broader implications of bringing these ecosystems back to life. The Saiga antelope, Saiga tatarika, is native to the steppes of Central Asia, particularly Kazakhstan, but has historically ranged across a broader area, including parts of Eastern Europe, Mongolia, and even areas of North America during the Pleistocene epoch. During the Pleistocene, Saiga antelopes roamed across parts of what is now North America, primarily in the Great Plains. Fossil evidence suggests they lived alongside other large mammals, such as mammoths and saber-toothed cats. However, during the end of the Pleistocene, around 10,000 years ago, these animals began to disappear, likely due to a combination of climatic changes, hunting pressures, and ecological shifts that wiped out many megafauna species in North America. As climate patterns changed after the Ice Age, many species, including the Saiga antelope, faced difficulties in adapting to the new environmental conditions. In addition, human hunting and the encroachment of other species into the antelope's habitat likely contributed to their extinction in the region. Today, the Saiga is found primarily in Central Asia, notably in Kazakhstan, where its population has fluctuated significantly due to factors such as habitat loss, poaching, and disease outbreaks. The population had drastically declined in the early 2000s, with numbers as low as 50,000 individuals, largely due to an outbreak of pneumonia that decimated much of the population. However, as of recent estimates, the Saiga population in Kazakhstan has recovered to an encouraging 4-5 million individuals. This resurgence is thanks to various conservation efforts and protection initiatives, such as anti-poaching laws, the establishment of protected areas, and scientific research into the health and well-being of the species. While the Saiga is still considered vulnerable, particularly in certain parts of its range, the recovery in Kazakhstan is a positive sign for the species' survival. These efforts have helped stabilize their numbers, though the Saiga still faces significant threats, including the potential for future disease outbreaks, climate change, and habitat destruction. In short, the Saiga once roamed North America during the Pleistocene, but became extinct in the region due to changing climates and human activities. Today, conservation efforts have helped the species recover in parts of Central Asia, particularly Kazakhstan, where their population has rebounded significantly. Rewilding the Saiga antelope in North America is an idea that has gained attention, particularly among conservationists and ecologists, who believe it could help restore some of the ecosystem functions lost since the extinction of many Pleistocene megafauna. While the idea of reintroducing Saiga to North America is intriguing, it comes with both challenges and potential benefits. Saiga antelopes, like many large herbivores, played significant ecological roles in the ecosystems they inhabited. In their original range, including parts of North America during the Pleistocene, they likely contributed to shaping the landscape in several ways. Saigas are known for grazing on grasses and plants in the steppe and grassland ecosystems. By feeding on vegetation, they would have prevented the overgrowth of certain plant species, thereby maintaining grassland biodiversity. Their grazing habits may have also helped maintain the open landscape, preventing encroachment by woody plants and shrubs. Like other herbivores, saigas likely contributed to the dispersal of plant seeds. As they moved across large areas, they may have played a role in spreading plant species, which helped maintain the health and diversity of the ecosystem. The presence of saiga would have supported the food web in the Pleistocene by being prey for carnivores, such as large predators like wolves and big cats. Their absence has left a gap in this predator-prey dynamic. Bringing saiga antelopes back to North America could help restore these ecological processes, especially in the Great Plains, which are now dominated by monoculture farming and livestock grazing. Why North America needs saiga antelope back? There are several reasons why reintroducing saiga antelopes to North America could be beneficial. Many ecosystems in North America, especially the Great Plains, have undergone significant changes since the Pleistocene extinction event. The loss of large herbivores has led to shifts in vegetation, which may have reduced biodiversity and disrupted ecosystem dynamics. Reintroducing saigas could help restore balance by controlling vegetation and promoting the growth of native plant species. Saiga antelopes are a keystone species, meaning their presence has a disproportionate impact on the structure and health of the ecosystems they inhabit. Their grazing helps maintain a diverse range of plants, which in turn supports a variety of other wildlife. Their reintroduction could help restore biodiversity in degraded areas and contribute to the resilience of ecosystems. Rewilding, the process of reintroducing species to areas where they were previously extinct, is gaining traction as a conservation tool. It aims to restore natural processes and interactions in ecosystems, making them more robust to climate change and other human impacts. By reintroducing the saiga, it could serve as part of a broader rewilding strategy in North America that focuses on restoring ecological functions rather than just focusing on individual species. Saiga antelopes are unique and charismatic animals with a fascinating evolutionary history. Reintroducing them to North America would offer educational opportunities and a chance to reconnect with the region's Pleistocene past. It could also inspire public interest in conservation efforts and rewilding initiatives. Rewilding the saiga antelope in North America would need to focus on regions that closely resemble the animal's native steppe and grassland ecosystems, where they can thrive in conditions similar to those they occupied during the Pleistocene. These areas should have sufficient grazing land, minimal human disturbance, and ecological conditions that support their specific needs. Some key regions that could be suitable for reintroducing saiga antelopes include the Great Plains, stretching from northern Canada through the central United States, were once home to large herds of megafauna, including the saiga antelope. The open grasslands, prairie ecosystems, and temperate climate resemble the environments where saigas once lived. These grasslands are home to a variety of native plant and animal species that could support a saiga population. The return of the saiga could help restore some of the ecological processes that have been disrupted by overgrazing by cattle and agricultural practices. There are already established conservation areas and national parks within the Great Plains that could provide suitable habitat for reintroducing saigas. For example, places like the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve in Oklahoma or the Prairie National Park in Kansas might provide an initial area to test the reintroduction. The Canadian prairies, which extend through Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, have vast expanses of grasslands and temperate climates similar to the saiga's native range in Central Asia. These regions also have a history of megafauna that would have included similar grazing species. The Canadian prairies have low human population density compared to other areas in North America, reducing the likelihood of human-wildlife conflict and making it easier to manage large rewilding efforts. The region is already engaged in conservation efforts, such as the restoration of native prairie ecosystems. This makes it a viable location to reintroduce saiga antelopes as part of broader ecological restoration projects. The Great Basin, which includes parts of Nevada, Utah, and Oregon, has vast open spaces and grasslands with a climate that could support saiga populations. The region is largely arid, but has rich plant diversity that saigas could graze on. The area is remote and has relatively low human population density, making it an ideal location for a rewilding project where human interference could be minimized. The Great Basin is part of ongoing conservation efforts, especially related to grassland restoration. Rewilding saigas here could complement these efforts, helping to restore ecological processes like grazing and seed dispersal. While not as characteristic of the saiga's native range, southern British Columbia and northern California have mild, temperate climates and large expanses of grassland and shrubland that could support the species. These regions could serve as transitional zones where saigas might adapt to new ecological conditions. These areas support a diverse range of grasses and plants, offering a variety of food sources for saiga herds. Both southern British Columbia and northern California are home to national parks and protected areas, such as the Yosemite National Park and the Kootenai National Park, that could provide a safe haven for saiga populations, reducing the risk of poaching or habitat destruction. In northern Mexico, the Sonoran Desert and Chihuahua Desert regions are characterized by arid landscapes and grasslands, with a climate somewhat similar to the saiga's native range. These regions are sparsely populated, and their natural habitats could support large herbivores like saigas. Furthermore, areas like the Chihuahuan Desert have been identified for rewilding projects aimed at restoring native species and habitats, making this region a good candidate for experimental reintroductions. Rewilding the Saiga antelope in North America would introduce an intriguing dynamic in ecosystems that have been shaped by a diverse array of herbivores, carnivores, and other species. Both Saiga antelopes and deer, like white-tailed deer or mule deer, are herbivores, and they may compete for similar food resources, especially grasses and shrubs. However, because saigas are adapted to grazing on open grasslands and deer are more adaptable to forested environments, they may not directly compete in areas where their habitats overlap. If the saigas are placed in grassland habitats, they may push deer populations toward more forested regions or reduce deer densities in areas of overlap, especially if food becomes limited. In this case, both species could coexist if managed properly to ensure enough resources are available for both. Elk are larger herbivores that also graze on grasses and shrubs, similar to saigas. Elk could potentially compete with saigas for food, especially in regions of high vegetation productivity. Elk have a larger body size and may dominate certain feeding areas, but saigas are highly mobile and form large herds, which could give them an advantage in maintaining access to grazing resources. Additionally, saigas prefer more arid and open grasslands, while elk often inhabit forested or mixed environments. In open grasslands or steppe ecosystems, saigas and elk could potentially coexist by occupying different ecological niches, saigas in drier, more open areas, and elk in areas with mixed terrain or forests. Moose are solitary, larger herbivores that often feed on shrubs and aquatic vegetation, whereas saigas primarily graze on grasses. Because their diets are different, their competition for food would be minimal. Moose are less likely to compete directly with saiga antelopes due to their differing diets and habitat preferences. Moose may prefer wetter, forested habitats, while saigas thrive in dry, open grasslands. They could coexist with minimal conflict. Wild boar are omnivores and can be highly disruptive to the environment, rooting through soil and causing damage to vegetation. They might compete with saigas for food resources, especially roots and grasses. Wild boar may cause significant ecological disturbances by uprooting plants and creating bare patches of soil, which could alter the availability of grazing areas for saigas. However, saigas could potentially help in maintaining grassland vegetation through grazing, which may reduce the extent of boar disturbance. Collared peccaries are omnivores that primarily feed on fruits, roots, small animals, and plants. Although they are not direct competitors with saigas, they can overlap in the use of food resources such as roots, tubers, and low-growing grasses. Peccaries are known to forage heavily in the soil, which could alter the availability of certain plant species. However, saigas are primarily grazers, and their primary food sources are grasses. The two species may have minimal competition for food, though peccaries could disturb the soil and affect plant growth, indirectly impacting saiga grazing areas. Both saiga antelopes and pronghorns are native to grassland habitats and are adapted to grazing on similar types of vegetation. Pronghorns are well adapted to North America's grasslands and are fast runners, similar to the saiga's ability to migrate in herds across large areas. There is potential for cooperation rather than direct competition, as both species are herbivores that graze on grasses and plants. Their interactions could be similar to those seen between other large grazing species on the Great Plains, like bison and pronghorn. If managed well, both species could coexist and contribute to ecosystem balance by maintaining open grasslands and preventing shrub overgrowth. Wild sheep, such as bighorn sheep or Dall sheep, are also herbivores, and they share similar grazing grounds with saigas. Wild sheep often inhabit rugged, mountainous terrains, while saigas prefer open, flat grasslands or steppe. The likelihood of direct competition for food is low due to their differing habitat preferences. Wild sheep might graze on different vegetation types, including shrubs and alpine grasses, while saigas would primarily target low-growing grasses. If their ranges overlap in highland grasslands, competition could occur, but both species are likely to have some ecological separation based on elevation and terrain. Bison are large herbivores that once dominated North American grasslands. They graze on grasses and can have a strong impact on vegetation. Bison and saigas might compete for food, especially during periods of drought or food scarcity. Bison, being much larger, might dominate feeding areas, especially in the late summer and fall when grasses are at their most nutritious. However, saigas, being smaller and highly mobile, could avoid direct competition with bison by grazing in different areas or at different times. Wild horses, like mustangs, are herbivores that graze on grasses, much like saigas. Wild horses and saigas could potentially compete for grazing resources in shared habitats. Wild horses tend to form large herds and are highly mobile, much like saigas. While there could be some competition for food, the differing grazing patterns between the species might allow for some coexistence. For example, horses might graze more on taller grasses, while saigas prefer shorter grasses, leading to some spatial separation in their feeding habits. Feral donkeys are herbivores that graze on grasslands and shrubs, much like Saiga antelopes. Feral donkeys could potentially compete with saigas for food. Donkeys are more adaptable to arid environments, and their tendency to graze intensely on vegetation could lead to competition with saigas. In areas where their ranges overlap, donkeys might degrade the habitat, making it more difficult for saigas to find food. Management practices would need to focus on maintaining balanced herbivore populations to reduce this competition. Feral zebras are herbivores that graze on grasses, similar to Saiga antelopes. Zebras, however, are not native to North America, and their impact on the ecosystem could be unpredictable. Zebras and saigas could potentially coexist, but there would be competition for grazing resources. Zebras are also more adapted to savanna-type ecosystems and might prefer more open landscapes, which could overlap with saiga grazing areas. This competition could be mitigated by separating their grazing territories. Feral antelopes, often species from Africa and Indian like the African antelope or nilgai, might have similar grazing habits to saigas and could compete for resources, particularly if they share overlapping ranges. However, the exact interaction would depend on the species involved and the specific region in which they are introduced. If feral antelopes are close relatives of the saiga, for instance, certain African species, there could be concerns about hybridization, although this is unlikely to happen unless the populations are closely related genetically. Feral cattle are large herbivores that graze on grasses and could compete with saiga antelopes for food. Cattle are typically larger than saigas and have a more significant impact on vegetation due to their size. Similar to bison, feral cattle could compete with saigas for grazing resources, especially in areas with limited vegetation. Cattle are more destructive to the land, trampling plant life and causing erosion. Effective land management would be required to prevent overgrazing and ensure that both species can coexist. Feral llamas, similar to camels, are herbivores and graze on grasslands, shrubs, and small plants. They could compete with saigas for food resources, especially in regions of overlapping range. Llamas are smaller than camels but still have a significant impact on vegetation due to their grazing. However, saigas prefer open grasslands, and llamas might prefer higher altitude or more rugged environments. If their ranges overlap, there might be some competition for food, but it would likely be minimal as both species can adapt to varying terrain. Camels, particularly the dromedary, one-humped camel, are herbivores that thrive in arid and semi-arid environments. They are adapted to desert ecosystems, but can also graze on grasslands. Both camels and Saiga antelopes can coexist in regions with similar food sources. Camels are larger and can impact the landscape by trampling vegetation, but they also help in creating open spaces, which could benefit grazing species like saigas. The competition for grazing resources would be minimal as long as the range is extensive, with saigas preferring shorter grasses and camels more focused on shrubs and tough desert grasses. They would coexist by occupying different ecological niches in shared environments. Elephants, when rewilded, would have a profound impact on ecosystems as they are large herbivores, capable of significantly shaping their environments through their feeding habits and movement. Elephants can knock down trees, uproot plants, and create waterholes, which could affect saiga habitats. The introduction of elephants could lead to competition for grazing resources, particularly in drier regions where water and vegetation are limited. However, elephants could also create conditions favorable to saigas by opening up dense vegetation, creating more open spaces for grazing. The two species might be able to coexist if managed to prevent resource conflict. Mammoths, once reintroduced, would be a dominant force in North American ecosystems, grazing on vast amounts of vegetation and possibly creating open grassland areas. Mammoths could help maintain habitats for Saiga antelopes by preventing the encroachment of trees and shrubs. The presence of mammoths could help maintain the grasslands that saigas rely on. However, competition for food could be an issue, especially in areas where food resources are limited. If managed correctly, mammoths and saigas could form complementary parts of a healthy ecosystem, with the mammoths helping to shape the landscape for the smaller grazers like saigas. Capybaras are semi-aquatic herbivores that prefer wetland and grassland areas. They are more likely to interact with Saiga antelopes in areas where wetlands and grasslands overlap. Capybaras and saigas would have minimal competition for food, as capybaras graze primarily on grasses near water, while saigas prefer drier habitats. These two species could coexist in overlapping regions without significant conflict. Tapirs are herbivores that primarily feed on fruits, leaves, and aquatic plants in more forested or riparian habitats. They are less likely to compete directly with saigas, which prefer open grasslands. Tapirs and saigas could coexist with minimal competition, especially if their ranges are separated by habitat types, for example, saigas in grasslands and tapirs in wetlands. However, if their habitats overlap, they might compete for certain plant species. Beavers are ecosystem engineers, creating wetlands by damming rivers and streams. Their presence could alter the landscape significantly, creating more moist wetland areas, which would not be typical saiga habitat. While saigas prefer dry, open grasslands, beavers could influence the hydrology and vegetation of surrounding areas. If beavers create wetlands or floodplains near saiga habitats, it could change the landscape, affecting the availability of grazing areas. However, saigas might adapt to these changes, and the two species could potentially coexist if their ranges do not overlap significantly. Otters are aquatic mammals that primarily live in freshwater ecosystems, feeding on fish, invertebrates, and small amphibians. They would not directly compete with saigas for food, but may influence the surrounding environment. Otters' presence could lead to the creation of wetland areas, but this would not affect saiga grazing directly, as saigas prefer drier grassland habitats. However, the presence of otters in a broader ecosystem could help maintain healthy wetlands and water sources, which might indirectly benefit saigas by supporting the overall biodiversity of the area. Small mammals such as voles, mice, and rabbits are abundant in grassland ecosystems and often serve as prey for predators. They coexist with saiga antelopes as part of the broader food web. Small mammals would likely not compete with saiga antelopes for food, as they feed on seeds, roots, and other plant material that saigas do not typically graze on. The presence of small mammals could even benefit saigas by increasing the number of insects and other small creatures available for them to encounter while grazing. In turn, the saigas could help maintain grassland habitats, which provide shelter and food for small mammals. Various bird species, particularly grassland birds, could coexist with saiga antelopes. Birds might benefit from the disturbance saigas cause to the vegetation, which could expose insects and seeds for foraging. Birds would likely benefit from the presence of saiga antelopes by having access to more exposed ground for foraging. In particular, smaller birds that feed on insects or seeds might be attracted to areas disturbed by saigas. Additionally, some species might use saiga herds as cover or for nesting. Birds like grouse, sparrows, and hawks could form part of the ecosystem that complements the presence of grazing herbivores. Wolves, particularly the grey wolf, are apex predators in North America and would likely view saiga antelopes as potential prey. Wolves typically hunt in packs and target weaker or slower individuals, so saigas would be at risk, particularly the young, old, or injured members of a herd. Wolves would play a role in controlling saiga populations by preying on individuals, which would help maintain a healthy and sustainable herd. This predation would also influence saiga behavior, encouraging them to form larger herds for safety. However, the saiga antelope's primary defense mechanism, speed and agility, would help them evade wolves, especially in open grassland areas where they are able to outrun predators. Colossal Biosciences has recently revived dire wolves using gene editing techniques, resulting in pups like Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi. These animals are not true dire wolves, but are designed to resemble them. Their larger size and pack behavior could make them formidable predators for saigas, especially in open grasslands. The new dire wolves are genetically engineered grey wolves with approximately 99.5% grey wolf DNA and 0.5% of their genome edited to mimic key dire wolf traits. Modern grey wolves, Canis lupus, provide the base genome, comprising roughly 99.5% of the genetic material in these pups. Dire wolf edits. Scientists identified and edited about 20 genetic variants across 14 genes, amounting to 0.5% of the genome, to impart traits such as larger body size, broader skull, and pale coat color associated with the extinct dire wolf, Enocean dirus. These animals represent a genetic engineering with 99.5% of their genome unaltered grey wolf DNA and only 0.5% edited to mimic dire wolves. The new dire wolves could be reintroduced as part of a broader rewilding effort. As larger, more robust predators than modern grey wolves, dire wolves would likely be even more capable of taking down large herbivores like the saiga antelope. The new dire wolf would be a formidable predator for the saiga antelope, likely causing a significant pressure on the saiga population. However, the presence of such a predator could also help regulate the saiga numbers, preventing overgrazing and helping maintain the balance of the ecosystem. Like modern wolves, dire wolves would target the weakest members of the herd, but might be more effective in taking down healthy adults, leading to stronger selection pressures on saiga herds. The American dingo, a wild dog related to the Australian dingo, would likely have similar hunting strategies to wolves. As a pack hunter, the dingo could pose a threat to saiga antelopes, particularly the young or weakened individuals. However, since the dingo is smaller than a wolf or dire wolf, its impact would likely be less direct. The American dingo would likely target the young and vulnerable members of the saiga population, particularly in areas where food sources are scarce. This predation pressure could lead to a natural selection process, where only the strongest and most agile saigas survive, further shaping the evolution of the species. Red wolves, Canis rufus, are native to the southeastern United States and are much smaller than grey wolves. They tend to hunt smaller prey, such as deer, rabbits, and other small mammals. While they would likely hunt Saiga antelopes, their predatory tactics would be focused more on juvenile or weaker individuals. The interaction between Saiga antelopes and red wolves would be less intense than with larger wolves or dire wolves, but red wolves would still help regulate Saiga populations. Their presence would contribute to the ecosystem's balance by keeping Saiga numbers within sustainable limits and preventing overgrazing. Eastern wolves, Canis lycaon, are another wolf species that historically roamed parts of North America. These wolves tend to be smaller than grey wolves, but are still highly skilled predators. Eastern wolves would likely prey on Saiga antelopes, especially targeting younger individuals or those that are sick or injured. Eastern wolves would be less of a threat to adult Saigas than grey wolves or dire wolves, but they could still influence the Saiga population by taking out weaker individuals. Their predation would help maintain a healthy balance within the Saiga herd, ensuring that only the most robust individuals survive and reproduce. Coyotes are highly adaptable predators that hunt a variety of prey, including small mammals, birds, and sometimes larger herbivores. While coyotes could prey on Saiga antelopes, particularly targeting the young or injured, they would not typically pose a major threat to healthy adults. Coyotes could contribute to the control of Saiga populations, particularly in areas where other larger predators, like wolves, are not as prevalent. Coyotes might target newborn Saiga fawns, helping to ensure that only the most robust individuals survive to adulthood. Their presence would help diversify the predatory pressures on Saiga populations, which could lead to healthier herds. Coy wolves are a hybrid species, resulting from the mating of coyotes and grey wolves. These animals combine the adaptability and opportunistic hunting strategies of coyotes with the larger size and pack hunting behavior of wolves. Coy wolves would likely be more effective than regular coyotes at preying on Saiga antelopes. Coy wolves could create additional predatory pressure on Saiga herds, especially as they have the ability to take down larger prey through cooperative hunting in packs. As with wolves and dire wolves, this would help regulate the Saiga population and encourage natural herd dynamics, where only the strongest and most agile individuals survive to reproduce. Red foxes are opportunistic predators that typically prey on smaller animals like rodents, birds, and insects. While they might not pose a direct threat to Saiga antelopes, they could indirectly affect Saiga populations by targeting young fawns or vulnerable individuals in the herd. The interaction between red foxes and Saiga antelopes would likely be minimal, as foxes primarily hunt smaller prey. However, if Saiga fawns are left unprotected or are sick or injured, red foxes could take advantage of the opportunity. The impact would likely be more noticeable in the early stages of rewilding, as foxes would target the more vulnerable members of the Saiga population. Grey foxes, like red foxes, are opportunistic predators, but are more arboreal and adept at climbing trees. They would typically not interact with Saiga antelopes on a regular basis, as their primary prey is smaller animals. Grey foxes would have a negligible direct impact on Saiga antelopes. They might scavenge on carcasses left behind by larger predators, but they would not actively hunt healthy adult Saigas. The primary role of grey foxes would be more in scavenging rather than preying on live Saigas. Black bears are omnivores, but they are opportunistic carnivores that will prey on small to medium-sized herbivores, including fawns, if the opportunity arises. Adult black bears could pose a threat to young Saiga antelopes, especially if the herds are spread out and unable to rely on their typical defensive strategy of fleeing at high speeds. Black bears could help regulate Saiga populations by predating on young, injured, or sick individuals. However, due to their more varied diet, black bears might not be a consistent threat to the Saiga herds. The interaction would likely be minimal compared to other predators like wolves, but black bears could still help maintain balance in the Saiga population by controlling the number of weaker individuals. Grizzly bears are much larger and more powerful than black bears. They are also opportunistic carnivores, often preying on larger mammals, including ungulates. Grizzly bears would likely prey on young or injured Saiga antelopes, as well as potentially attacking adult Saigas in rare cases, if other food sources are scarce. Grizzly bears would exert more predatory pressure on Saiga populations compared to black bears. Since grizzlies are larger and more aggressive, they could significantly impact Saiga fawns, especially in areas where the Saiga herds are more dispersed. Grizzlies may play a role in natural population control, preventing overgrazing by keeping the Saiga numbers in check. Wolverines are powerful and aggressive carnivores, known for their ability to take down prey much larger than themselves. While they are typically scavengers, they are capable hunters and could attack weak or injured Saiga antelopes, particularly young or sick individuals. Wolverines would likely have a relatively small effect on the Saiga antelope population due to their solitary and opportunistic hunting habits. However, their presence could contribute to natural population control by removing weaker individuals from the herd. Their aggressive nature may also serve to help regulate the health of the Saiga herd by targeting sickly or injured individuals. Bobcats are smaller, more stealthy predators that typically prey on smaller mammals, such as rodents, birds, and rabbits. While they may occasionally prey on Saiga fawns or the very young, they would not be a significant threat to adult Saigas. Bobcats would likely have minimal impact on Saiga populations. Their role in the ecosystem would focus more on controlling smaller prey species rather than exerting direct pressure on Saiga antelopes. However, they could still contribute to maintaining balance by removing vulnerable individuals from the Saiga population. The Canadian lynx, a larger and more specialized predator compared to bobcats, primarily hunts snowshoe hares. However, it has been known to prey on smaller ungulates in times of scarcity. While a lynx would likely not target healthy adult Saigas, it could potentially prey on young Saiga fawns or weakened individuals. The Canadian lynx would likely have minimal direct impact on Saiga populations, but could serve as a predator of opportunity. If Saiga fawns or young individuals are left unprotected or separated from the herd, lynx could play a role in controlling their numbers, helping the overall population remain healthy. Ocelots are smaller carnivores found primarily in the southern regions of North America. Their prey typically consists of smaller mammals, birds, and reptiles. Ocelots would likely not pose a direct threat to adult Saiga antelopes, but they might target vulnerable fawns or injured individuals. Ocelots would have minimal impact on the Saiga antelope population. Their hunting style is focused on smaller prey, so their role in the ecosystem would be less significant compared to larger predators like wolves or bears. However, their presence could still help maintain a balanced population by removing vulnerable individuals. Cougars, also known as mountain lions or pumas, are one of North America's most effective predators. They are capable of taking down large herbivores like deer and would certainly target Saiga antelopes if they were reintroduced. Cougars would likely be one of the more significant predators of Saiga antelopes. They would target weaker or isolated individuals, such as young, injured, or elderly members of the herd. Cougar predation would help regulate Saiga populations and maintain the balance of the ecosystem by preventing overgrazing and overpopulation. Their hunting strategy, which involves ambushing prey, would likely result in sporadic but significant pressure on Saiga herds. Jaguars are the largest wild cats in the Americas and are highly capable predators, capable of killing large herbivores like deer, capybaras, and even caimans. If rewilded in North America, they would likely target Saiga antelopes. Jaguars would be formidable predators for the Saiga antelope, and they could contribute to controlling Saiga numbers through predation. Their powerful jaws and ability to ambush prey make them an effective predator of young or vulnerable Saigas. However, like other big cats, they would primarily target weak or injured individuals, and their presence would help ensure that only the healthiest members of the herd survive to reproduce. Cheetahs are incredibly fast predators, specialized in chasing down and capturing fast-moving prey. If cheetahs were reintroduced to North America, they could potentially pose a serious threat to Saiga antelopes due to the antelope's relatively fast running speeds, though not quite as fast as a cheetah. Cheetahs would likely target younger or weaker Saiga individuals. The introduction of cheetahs would add another layer of predatory pressure on the saiga population. Their speed and hunting style would influence the behavior and movement of saiga herds, potentially leading to more dispersed herds to avoid predation. Their presence could help regulate saiga numbers, while encouraging the saiga to evolve even faster and more agile traits over time. Lions, as apex predators, would be capable of preying on adult saiga antelopes. They hunt in prides and are powerful enough to take down large herbivores. If lions were reintroduced to North America, they would likely pose a serious threat to saiga populations, particularly in open grassland ecosystems where both species would coexist. The reintroduction of lions would significantly impact saiga antelope populations. Lions would target both adult and juvenile saiga, potentially leading to a more controlled population size. While the lions would help maintain balance in the ecosystem, their predation would exert strong selection pressures on the saiga herd. In the long run, this interaction would shape the evolutionary trajectory of the saiga, possibly favoring faster individuals or those with more defensive strategies. Raptors, such as eagles, hawks, and vultures, would primarily scavenge from saiga carcasses or prey on young, weak individuals. While they would not typically pose a direct threat to healthy adult saigas, they might target saiga fawns or scavenge from kills made by larger predators. Raptors would likely have a minimal direct impact on saiga populations, but could contribute to the ecosystem by helping to clean up carcasses and control smaller prey species. Their presence would help maintain ecological balance, particularly in areas where larger predators are absent or less common. Alligators are primarily found in wetland habitats and would not typically interact with saiga antelopes, as they prefer aquatic prey such as fish and amphibians. However, in regions where saigas might venture near wetlands or river systems, alligators could pose a threat to young saiga calves or weakened individuals. While the risk would be minimal, alligators could contribute to the predation pressure on young saiga antelopes, particularly near water sources. However, alligators are unlikely to have a significant impact on the overall saiga population, as their primary food source would be smaller animals. Why we need Pleistocene rewilding in North America? Pleistocene rewilding in North America envisions the restoration of ecosystems to resemble the rich biodiversity and predator-prey dynamics of the Pleistocene epoch, roughly 2.6 million to 11,700 years ago. During this time, North America was home to a remarkable array of megafauna and ecological relationships, many of which have since vanished due to human-driven extinctions. Rewilding seeks to bring back analog or de-extinct species to fill the ecological roles left vacant, re-establishing balance, biodiversity, and ecological function. Interactions among wildlife in a rewilded Pleistocene North America would be dynamic and complex. Large herbivores such as bison, wild horses, feral cattle, camels, reintroduced elephants, tapirs, capybaras, and possibly even resurrected mammoths would graze and browse across vast grasslands and forests, shaping vegetation and creating habitats for smaller species. Animals like the saiga antelope and pronghorn would roam open plains, influencing grass dynamics and serving as prey for predators. Beavers and otters would engineer rivers and wetlands, supporting fish, amphibians, and birds. Birds of prey would thrive on rodents, fawns, and carrion across diverse habitats, while small mammals would support entire food chains. Predators, both native and reintroduced, would regulate herbivore populations and maintain healthy ecosystems. Wolves, coyotes, cougars, and black bears would coexist with reintroduced dire wolves, American dingoes, red wolves, and eastern wolves, forming a complex web of predation and competition. Apex predators like jaguars, lions, and even cheetahs, if reintroduced, would keep herbivore numbers in check and distribute them across landscapes to avoid overgrazing. Scavengers, from foxes to vultures, would clean up after kills, helping control disease and recycle nutrients. The presence of large carnivores also triggers a trophic cascade, benefiting plant life, songbirds, and even water quality by moderating herbivore pressure. Carnivorous interactions would extend further with large omnivores and ambush predators. Grizzlies and wolverines would compete with large cats and canines for food and territory. Small carnivores like bobcats, lynxes, and ocelots would hunt rodents and fawns, while apex raptors could target both small mammals and young ungulates. Alligators and future reintroduced crocodilians would patrol wet areas, playing roles similar to their ancient counterparts. Together, this full predator-prey system ensures population control, genetic health, and a mosaic of niches across North America. The need for Pleistocene rewilding in North America is ecological, evolutionary, and philosophical. Ecologically, many habitats remain unbalanced due to the absence of large herbivores and predators. Forests overgrow, grasslands shrink, and invasive species proliferate. Rewilding restores keystone species and ecological engineers, improving biodiversity, fire regulation, soil health, and carbon sequestration. Evolutionarily, North America lost more megafauna than almost any other continent. Rewilding reclaims that ancient legacy and gives native species the conditions to adapt and thrive. Philosophically and ethically, it offers a chance to repair the damage done by humans 13,000 years ago and reawaken a primal connection to wildness and nature. In essence, Pleistocene rewilding would not just bring back animals, it would bring back balance. By restoring the full symphony of North America's ancient ecosystems, we ensure healthier landscapes, greater climate resilience, and a richer future for both wildlife and humans. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you believe in a wilder Europe, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into the world's most ambitious conservation projects. Together, we can make the wild a part of our future, here in North America and beyond.